Welcome back to Precision Performance Garage. First off, I'd like to say thank you for all those who subscribe. We passed the 200 subscriber mark, which is a big deal. So thank you very much for following my videos. Thank you for being a community that's supportive of the Acura and Honda enthusiast platforms. And today we're going to talk about the power steering pump issue from the last video. It's a little bit interesting. We're also going to talk about what's going on with the Acura CL after the first start, and why I was still having issues, or why I'm still having issues with getting it all sorted after we did all that work this winter. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what the upcoming plans are for this car. So stay tuned. Let's get started. Okay, so in the last video, we had this issue with the power steering pump. Well, we put it all back together, and then we did our first start, and it didn't go well, right? So if you missed what happened in that video, here's kind of a synopsis. Somehow the casing, and I'll try to show you right here, right there, it cracked. And obviously when you're trying to create a seal, and it has to be an airtight seal in the power steering pump, that's kind of the major reason why these whine, right? Well, this crack that you can see that goes all the way down the casting of the power steering pump itself is what failed. Now, why did it fail? And I think I know why. So when we did the power steering pump rebuild, which there's nothing wrong with that video, so if you want to know how to rebuild your power steering pump, completely take it apart and put it back together, watch that video. This is a fault of mine. So this uses an Allen key to basically torque it down, right? Well, I didn't have the proper tool to torque this down because all my bits weren't big enough to fit this opening. So what I did was I took a regular Allen key with no torque wrench to it and just wrenched on it until it was down and tight. And so I kind of took the concept of, if it's tight, then it's going to be well sealed against this gasket that we had to replace right here. Well, I think what in turn happened was I torqued it down too much. And I probably put a small crack in here, didn't realize it, but when it pressurized, it expanded that crack and then it leaked, because I went back and looked at the footage. The leak didn't happen until it was like half a minute or a minute within the runtime of that video. So, word to the wise, if you're going to rebuild your power steering pump, make sure that you don't over torque your bolts, because this is a thin aluminum casting right here, and when you torque this down and you put all that pressure on it, plus the pressure of the actual PSI from the fluid, you get this happening, and this is what failed. So what's the solution to this? I'll show you. So here's our solution. This looks like a used power steering pump, and it is. So what I do when I have an issue with an OEM part, and I think a lot of people should take note of this, when you have an issue with an OEM part, like a power steering pump, like a starter, like an alternator, anything that requires, kind of that OEM part for it to function correctly, because you can get all these aftermarket, right? But I didn't want an aftermarket part, and the reason is because power steering pumps on Acuras and Hondas are so specific. They have their own fluid. They have to have, really tight fitting and gasketed connections, here, internally. And what ends up happening in the aftermarket ones is they fail. They fail so fast that I didn't want to go down that path, because then you're just sitting there constantly replacing power steering pumps. And that's not where you want to be. You want to be able to drive your car reliably. And yes, you can get these from Acura or Honda still today, but they're like $500. And I'm not going to pay $500. So what's the solution here? How do you get one of these? You get one of these through LKQ online. And if you haven't been on LKQ online, take a look at it. Because a lot of times what happens is, on these older cars, especially ones that are 20 years old like this CL, is that there are tons of parts just waiting on a shelf somewhere that nobody has used. And I say that because this power steering pump came from an Acura CL Type S, and it only has 54,000 miles on it. And you know that because when LKQ lists their parts online, they give you the VIN number of the vehicle that they're sourcing it from, plus they give you an odometer picture from the vehicle that they took it from. So, and they also, when they send this to you, they give you the VIN number of the vehicle attached right to it. So it really takes the guesswork out. Yeah, I mean, they could probably mix it up and blah, 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 but let's just assume that it's all on the up and up. Plus, it's free shipping. So you can't beat the price of this. This cost me, and I'm not kidding you, $46 free shipping, and I had it in 2 days because the LKQ location that I got it from was in Massachusetts, and I'm in Vermont. So real easy to get this. And it was so much faster. It's going to be more reliable. And yes, we rebuilt that old power steering pump, but I'm going to take all those gaskets and I'm going to put them on the shelf. This pump is still good. I've started the vehicle up since, all that catastrophe happened, and reinstalled this new to me used pump, and there's no noise. So I put new O-rings here, and I put new O-rings here, and this pump right here is factory sealed. Still has the original gaskets from when it left Acura, and I'm going to keep it like that because this works. All right, so we got a new part here. This is the Comptech oil cap, and so now we have Comptech headers, Comptech oil cap, Comptech battery tie down, Comptech ice box, Comptech titanium strut bar. Easily I could do a supercharger, and I've gone over this in videos. I'm not going to do a supercharger. It's not a smart idea to take an old car and then put boost on it. So that's not going to happen. So what we are going to do when we take this vehicle out of storage in about a month, it's going to get Comptech mufflers. Now, will I keep them on there? Maybe, maybe not. But I got such a great deal on these Comptech mufflers. We're going to rebuild them, and I'm going to show that video. So that's going to be coming up soon. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing our yearly preventative maintenance fluid changeover. We got to change our clutch fluid. We got to change our brake fluid. We got to do a full inspection on the suspension, and we got to do a full tire inspection. We got to do a battery. I think my battery might be dying, so we're going to take a look at that. We already did the power steering fluid pump, as you know, so that's our power steering fluid for the pump, as you know. And we did a coolant changeover, so now every year you should be changing out your brake fluid, and we should be using Honda brake fluid. That's my recommendation. So let's go into a little bit about what happened with the second startup. So power steering pump failed in the first startup. Second startup, IACV issue. So idle air control valve. I've talked about this when I did the cleaning on this. So cleaning is the first step. You should always start with cleaning, in my opinion, because more often than not, a $2 bottle of carb cleaner will solve your problem. You can use brake cleaner, whatever, one of those that evaporates very easily, that is combustible. You should start there. Well, what I discovered is that mine was actually failing. And here's the funny part. So I started up the vehicle and it was surging. So what happens is when you start the vehicle for the first warm-up period, it's idling off of a pre-programmed ECU setting until it reaches optimal temperature, which it senses by the intake air temperature and the coolant temperature. And then once it reads that those conditions are satisfied, it switches control of the idle over to the IACV valve. And essentially what it does is it creates a vacuum leak and it modulates it. A little bit less, a little bit more. And so this valve is constantly moving to articulate to compensate for that idle condition. When these start to fail, they start to fail for two reasons. They get built up and they need to be cleaned out because that valve can't open and close, but they also fail electronically because this is a constantly adjustable part. that's sitting there going zzz, zzz, like this. And when it does fail, it can fail for those two reasons. Well, I didn't want to spend the money to get an OEM one because they're $300, give or take. And so what I did was I started looking in the aftermarket part world because Denso isn't really making these anymore. At least I'm not aware of a source where you can get Denso. I cross-referenced this because I wanted to see if this could be replaceable and I could just keep this kind of manifold, if you will, for lack of a better term. And I couldn't find it. So I got one from Rock Auto, installed it, and I set a P1519. P1519 is IACV failure. And so I started backtracing ECU conditions because that made no sense. How can I have that one fail plus one from Rock Auto fail and not think that something else bigger was going on? So this is a third aftermarket one, and word to the wise, aftermarkets, you got to think about that. These quality assurance parts, are they going to last? So I know I'm talking a lot, but this right here, you want to make sure that this part is functioning correctly, because it will cause you problems in idling. And what you need to do once you do this, once you replace that, and a lot of people don't do this when they replace their IACVs, anytime that you disconnect power, anytime that you clear the ECU, and you can do this in a number of ways. You can pull a fuse, you can pull the main fuel relay. There's a bunch of things that will clear that idle programming, and you need to go back in there and relearn it. And the way you do that is you start the car up. You do, connect everything, blah, 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 get it ready to go. And then you get in the vehicle, you start it up, and you hold it at 3,000 RPM, dead on, until these two fans kick on. And once those two fans kick on, that means you're programmed. So that's what I did. And now we're back and running. So now we're ready for the spring. And we're going to do some point of view shots. We're going to do some, taking it possibly to a track. We're going to do some, what I think is more entertaining stuff. And along the way, we'll do maintenance and blah, 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 for those who like that portion. But we're going to actually drive this car. And we're going to take you with us. And we're going to make videos that depict the drivability of this vehicle. And I'm going to give you my honest opinion about what modifications that you should be doing to this vehicle if you own one. And there's different schools of thought on modification. You can do force induction, you can do suspension, you can do a number of things to these vehicles, and any vehicle for that matter, to make these more fun. But I'm going to actually go into what makes this car good and what I think makes it better and reliable. Because more often than not, people driving these vehicles are using them as their dailies. I don't think that there's very few of us that are actually using these in an enthusiast way as their third car. But you can. And I want to go into what it takes to do that. So, short video today. Thanks for listening. I know it's a little bit wordy today. You guys are always in the captions, kind of calling out some, of my wordiness. But today we're just going to go over what happened, a little word of advice, and kind of the future plans. So thanks once again for the 200 subscribers. Great video content coming. Stay tuned and have a good one.